Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Empower Performance Podcast. Today's guest is none other than my wife, Megan. She's a therapist. Um, she also has an athletic background. We'll talk about sports psychology, mental health in general, a couple other things. So it should be a good episode. Be nice to her. Um, but yeah, she's an intelligent person. She's an impressive person. So I hope you get a lot of value from this episode. Would you like
Should
to
be
introduce yourself?
should be a good episode, no pressure.
No pressure. Would you like to introduce yourself? What do you do, and how did you get into your field?
This is a little weird for me because I'm normally the person who's asking all the questions,
Uh,
so I'm gonna try to talk about myself and not feel uncomfortable.
mhm.
So what do I do? I currently am a resident in counseling and working towards my independent licensure. So it basically just means I have a supervisor and I already took a test and all of that, just waiting to get all my hours before I can officially be a licensed professional counselor on my own. And I've been doing that for almost 4 years now, I think, and I love it. It's great. Get to help a lot of people, and do you ask how did I get into it as well?
How did you choose? So, well, can I just add to this super quick, kind of a fun little
Yeah,
story? When people ask about what you do, typically the response that you get is, "Oh, therapist, like, I got a couple people that I can send your way," because everybody has, like, a crazy relative or something like that.
yeah,
Or they'll say, like, "Oh, like, you're in the right family. Therapy, this is the right family," whatever. You kinda hear those jokes. But the
yeah,
one that I tell people is that when Megan was in, undergrad, she originally thought she wanted to be in education, she wanted to be a teacher, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, after your first semester, you decided to go into therapy. But we hadn't been dating for too long up to that point, so I think that my mental state probably, ignited the shift in your focus educationally. So I like to tell people that I'm the reason why you are what you are today, and why you're able to help so many people. I'm the catalyst behind that,
yeah, don't flatter yourself.
yeah. But yeah, so how did you decide this is the field that you wanted to pursue, um, of this field specifically?
Well, I always was great at sports and terrible in school. Not terrible, but I could get by enough, but
Mhm.
having a learning disability myself, I never really excelled in academics until I got to college and really found my stride. Um, I went to college, thought I wanted to be an English teacher, and then did my first semester, realized if I wanted to change my career somehow down the line after 20 years working in education field, it would be really hard for me to start over again. So I took an intro psych class, always loved it, fell in love with it even more, had some great teachers, and always realized as well everybody around me was really good at either um, like education, school, or singing, or whatever talent. And I was like, well, I'm pretty good at people. I've always been told I'm a good listener. I really care about other people's well being and their feelings. So why not try and be a therapist and just hit the ground running and really try to make it happen. So we're basically there. So yeah, that's kind of
Alright, you're saying that you are a person of high emotional intelligence, and you thought you would lean into that because traditional academics was difficult for you with your double dyslexia.
look at you with your summarizations and your
Yeah.
reflective listening. Yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna have to do this is actually a good opportunity for me to learn how to ask questions and listen. This podcast has been a good opportunity for me to do that. So I understand how it may be weird for you to be on the other end, but you actually do, to give you credit, have the skill of listening to people, and asking questions. When it comes to like personal lives outside of this, for anybody listening, I'm actually naturally a very introverted person. I don't know if you can tell by my everything. Um, but yeah, I have difficulty just asking people, if it starts with small talk, it's kinda difficult for me to just, get people to open up and all that stuff, and, Megan does a great job. She just knows the right questions to ask and how to listen, make people feel seen, make people feel heard, and she tends to be pretty popular amongst my friends and family for that. Um, but yeah, if you wanna continue talking about emotional intelligence, uh, or to add to that, please do.
no, I think you're the talker in our relationship normally, so this is quite entertaining for me. But yeah,
Yeah, it's a
no,
good way around.
ready to answer whatever questions you got for me today, and hopefully it goes okay.
Let's start with big one. What is mental and emotional health, and why does it matter?
Good ones. Okay. So, what is mental and emotional health? I personally, after the work I've done in the last couple of years, have really thought mental and emotional health is your ability to stay regulated and to stay balanced throughout whatever life throws at you. So, yes, mental health, emotional health, you want to be happy and feel good all the time. But it also comes back to in the moments when you have high stress or life isn't going your way or you're in a disagreement with somebody or life really just sucks. How can you respond to that? How well can you regulate your nervous system, your thoughts, all of that to be able to feel and experience those things, but also logically work through it and problem solve in a productive way. So I think as a society, we were very much for a long time doing things of just logic. And then the pendulum kind of shifted a little bit too much towards, okay, well, let's go feelings based. And I really do think now it's about just trying to find the balance between the both of them. So that's what I think, and I think it's important too because and I tell my clients this, could you imagine if the whole world just reacted off of feelings? Be a
Kind of feels like
dumpster.
that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I say it would be a dumpster fire, and then
Mhm.
can you imagine if we just lived life based off of logic and reasoning? It would be pretty cold, and it would be
Mhm.
pretty boring, and
Mhm.
you wouldn't really have that much life to talk about or live, so, think that's important, is just be able to live life and be well adjusted.
I think to speak to this, for my fellows in the audience, there's this traditional thing, I'm generalizing, of course, where men in relationships will be more logical and women in relationships will be more emotionally driven. And in the sense that they want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be validated, and guys will just try to problem solve. And when you're talking about balance, I think it seems like it's what you do with your clients sometimes. I think the very first thing to do is to validate, to listen for them to feel seen and heard before trying to solve a problem. If you try to solve a problem without validating someone, then sometimes it may make them feel small or dumb as if they haven't tried to solve their own problem already. But then if you just validate and you never get to the root of the problem, then people are just paying you to show up every day and get a pat on the back. And it's almost like kissing a boo boo to make it go away. So from what I've
Yeah.
heard with your work, you do try to find the balance there where it is the technique you use is unconditional positive regard. If I'm not mistaken, you can speak to that and explain it. But then from there, I do know that you try to give people actionable steps and frameworks to have sustainable changes in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's a big misconception just about therapy in general is people think it's coming in to my office, sitting on a couch for 50 minutes, talking about their feelings and being told they're right the whole time. That's not the type of provider I am. You're spending a lot of money to come in and get my help with things, and yes, I wanna use person-centered therapy, which that's basically like the client knows themselves best, and yes, I'm always gonna think that you're coming from the right place, a good place, like you are truly a good person, um, but I'm also just not gonna let you come into my office and think that you're doing everything the right way when really if it could be done a little bit healthier or there's maybe a better way to approach it, yes, I'm going to try and help you figure out how to achieve that for yourself. But people just want to know that their human experience is real and it's okay to have that. And they just want to be heard. And a lot of times when they get that person to person connection first and then feel validated, feel like they're being heard and understood, then they're going to be more receptive to hearing that feedback of, oh, I probably could have communicated that better, or maybe my reaction was a little bit extreme, and how can I prevent that from happening next time? So, yeah.
So I'm going to go two different directions with what you just said. One of them is like directly responding to that, but then the second one is a little bit of a sidetrack. I'll start with the sidetrack. For anybody listening, I talk to Megan about my day in my work all the time because I'm a solo entrepreneur. I have no one to bounce ideas off of, so I just tell her everything, and I'm able to tell her about my sessions more in depth because there's not the same level of client confidentiality. I'll just talk about little stories back and forth with like clients or someone hit a PR, something cool like that. Um, Megan doesn't share too much about her work because of client confidentiality. Sometimes she'll share things in generalities. But the other thing too is she doesn't talk too much about the specifics of her job because when you have to talk for 7 hours back to back and you get home, your brain is fried, and the last thing you want to do is to have in-depth conversations. So I've learned to live with that. I'm sure anybody else who's in a relationship or married to a therapist understands like post therapy work brain. And what that looks like, and then to so this is just a fun moment for me to be able to listen and, hear you share your thoughts and the specifics of your work. The other thing is you're talking about it's not all sunshine and rainbows when you go into therapy. You do call people into question, if we keep them honest, I think is a better way to say it. A Without getting too specific, you once shared an example with me, and you didn't get too specific too, of course, because of client confidentiality. But the example was that there was a gentleman who was going to make a decision in regards to his family. I think you know what I'm talking about. Um, and you asked a question along the lines of, you didn't agree with it, but you're not supposed to be judgmental, because that kind of breaks the bond of the therapist and the client. You give them a judgment free space. If you judge them, then you break that space. But what you did instead was you asked them to think about how their decisions would impact other members of their family. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to keep people honest because you got them to work it out themselves as opposed to you saying, "Hey, dummy, this is a terrible idea." So it's interesting that you do keep the balance, but you also have to find a tactful way to do it. Is that something you'd like to speak to?
Some people can definitely handle, like, "Hey, that was a really stupid stupid way to look at it." Some people want a therapist that direct, and
Mhm,
they are out there.
mhm.
I am very much I can say, "Hey, that was really stupid," in a much nicer way that's
Yeah.
still direct, that people want
Mhm,
it, and, yeah, my role is supposed to be I'm not supposed to have a bias or anything like that, so that also comes a lot of the times with checking your own stuff at the door and
mhm.
recognizing, okay, what personal stuff in my life is being activated in this session right now that a client is bringing their stuff
Right.
into, and do I need to work on that myself? Do I need to pay attention to something else going on? So it's a very humbling field. You really need to just make sure that you're mentally, emotionally well adjusted yourself, because if not, then that can affect the people's lives that you're working with, and that's a big thing in our field, is to do no harm. So you just wanna make sure that they're coming in, getting what they need, and it's done in the most professional, ethical way possible. So,
You've
yeah.
also worked with a big mix of, men, women, different ages, different backgrounds, different traumas, different experiences, different problems. Um, so I imagine that's a difficult thing too, having to meet people where they're at and deal with all these different problems. And then also, remain judgment free, not compare your last session to the next one in terms of trauma, who has it worse, all that stuff. Would you care to speak to that?
It's funny that you say that, because I at the end of the day, it's a human to human experience,
Mhm,
right? So, yes, I've never maybe had a trauma like the person who's on my couch has gone through personally, but I'm
mhm,
still a human, and I know what pain, I know what suffering, I know what hurt, I know what all of that feels like as an individual, and so that's my way to connect with that person and sit in that with them,
mhm.
in those experiences. So,
So to add definitions, it's the difference between empathy and sympathy. If you can
yeah,
also explain that to the listener, what is the difference and which one are you employing in that instance where you don't share a similar background?
I can I can empathize with somebody, I can sit in that with them, I could say, "Hey, let me be in this moment, let me sit in this emotion with you."
Mhm.
That's empathy rather than sympathy, which is, to me, acknowledging the experience, but not really connecting with them on a deeper level. There's a great video, I
The
think it was
whole
Brené Brown. She came up with it, or she had it on, she did like a TED Talk a while ago where she has this little, cartoon where it basically explains the difference between empathy versus sympathy, and empathy, and it was like these 2 cartoon characters, and one of them fell down a hole and is stuck and needs help getting out, and the
Mhm.
person who has empathy says, "Here, I have this ladder. Let me give you the ladder, go down, sit with you in the hole, and and be in this moment with you, and then we can get out of it together," versus sympathy, where the person just stands up at the top of the hole and is like, "Hey, sorry, like, that looks like it sucks," and then just walks away. So, that's the example. It's a great, great video by Brené Brown.
The, other direction I wanted to go into. So that's the, I would say the connotation of empathy, sympathy, especially in your space. I believe the denotation is a shared experience versus a not shared experience. So sympathy could be we both have stubbed our toe before, so we can share that. But if you, okay, you're pregnant right now, you've had pregnancy pains. I've never had that. I
Yeah,
can empathize because I can imagine, but I can never understand. And sympathy
yeah,
is where I could. So it
yeah.
is interesting where there are those 2 different ways to look at it. Um, but then along those lines, I think it is interesting worth mentioning that part of the reason why, and of course, this is your story to share, part of the reason why you got into mental health is because it was something that you struggled uh, with your athletics and just earlier in your life. And when you started working, you wanted to work with young ladies that were in similar situations to what you'd been through, which I find is a sympathetic reason to work with these people, but then you started working with people in different fields. You started working with a lot of military. You can't share the experiences that they've had, and yet you had such a strong, uh, empathetic response for these people that that was a direction you wanted to shift towards. Um, can you speak to that? And then later, would you be willing to speak to your experiences before you even chose to go into this field?
So, start with
Start with
my
the yeah, empathy and sympathy. How you kind of shifted from wanting to work with one population to deciding you want to work with other populations.
Yeah, I think that was a case for me of just exposure, that when you are working towards your degree in this field and anything, you have to complete practicum and internship. And I was very lucky to be able to have a internship site that had a lot of diversity in the clients and the population, but we did get a lot of referrals from a military base. So I saw a lot of military families and service members who were seeking treatment, and just one, I loved working with them because they came in and were very motivated, and
Yeah, they wanted to do the work.
they wanted either, well, 2 things. They either wanted to do the work or hated therapy, didn't wanna touch it with a 2-foot pole, but were required to be there for, you know, retirement reasons, discharge reasons, whatever.
Mhm,
But I found it's kinda like educating somebody, in a whole new language when you're taught in the military, put your feelings aside. If you connect with these, basically, you will die and compromise the mission and everybody else. To then have to take them back into civilian life, reintegrate them, and tell them, how do you become mentally and emotionally healthy and well regulated, kind of like what we
mhm,
were referring to in the beginning of our talk, is just, it was such a rewarding experience for me to be able to get to do that with people who put their life on the line and sacrifice so much for me and my family. So
mhm.
that was a big reason, and just have met some really great people because of that. When I originally thought I wanted to work with eating disorders, I thought it was such an underserved population,
Mhm,
and that work is just very different to
mhm,
what I ended up falling in love with, was working with military individuals.
mhm.
So that was kind of how it happened for me. Does
And
that
then
answer it?
are you it does answer the question very well. Are you also willing to talk about your mental health struggles that you had, I guess, in particular with sports around that age, your high school age, because that's what you originally walked onto was you struggled at that point. You wanted to help other people at that point. Could you speak to that point for yourself?
Yeah, I I think when you refer back to that point or ask that question, I go immediately back to high school,
Mhm,
and there's a lot going on with me in high school.
mhm.
Just in terms of I I transferred from, like, a middle school.
Yeah, Catholic school to public school.
Yeah, Catholic school to public school. I knew maybe, like, 2 or 3 people,
Yeah,
and that was such just a hard transition for me, and uh, yeah, it was just really hard, and like I said, I always had sports, I always had soccer, I did travel soccer, really competitive, everything like that, and when you're in an environment where you don't know anybody, you're already not great at academics, and just in a new school and really uncomfortable, trying to immerse yourself in sports and become well adjusted is difficult. So I remember I didn't have the language or the knowledge to know what it was that I was dealing with at the time, but looking back now, I'm like, I was definitely depressed, which in teenage girl just presented as irritability and anger and
mhm.
all of
Hormones.
that. Yeah, but I remember my freshman year high school soccer tryouts. I loved going to soccer, like, that was the best part of my day, I had so much fun, and I was just really good at it, so it was a time when I was like, "This is the best," like, get off of school, hated it, go to practice with all your friends, goofing off, have the time of your life, and I didn't wanna go to my tryouts, and my parents came in my room and they woke me up to go to tryouts, and it was, like, on a weekend or something, and I didn't have the right language to describe what I was feeling at that time, but I made a comment to my parents about, like, "Hey, I don't like, you're making me wanna, like, not wanna be here by, like, what you're making me do."
Sure, sure.
Which again wasn't truly what I felt in that moment, but I didn't have the right language to describe what I was feeling, so
Mhm,
I went to tryouts. Again, like, I was good, so I made the team, and I remember my dad later telling me, he's like, "Yeah, I couldn't sleep that night with what you said," and I felt
yeah,
bad because I was like, "Well, didn't mean it, just didn't have the ways to describe it,
mhm,
didn't know how to ask for help in that moment, didn't really know what to
uh-huh,
do." So, they put me in therapy, and I hated it the first time, didn't wanna go. I think I said, like, maybe 2 words to the therapist. I was that client when I came in. But slowly over time, it just helped, it transformed everything, and then found my love for the game back, found some friends, and was able to become well-adjusted, and that was kind of my first transition into sports and mental health in that realm.
mhm. Um, it's interesting. I was listening to everything you said, but, along those lines, when you talked about your first therapy experiences, I'd never considered this before, but what would it be like if you right now had you then as your client? What would that look like, you know? And so you don't have to answer if you want to, feel free, but that's just something that I never considered before. I don't know if you've ever considered that before yourself.
No, I haven't. My first thought was, "Oh, I just wanna give her a hug," but you can't do that in therapy, but
Mhm,
I think the therapist I had at the time did a great job. I wish I still remembered her name or, like, where she was at,
mhm,
because I would say, like, "Thank you" to her, but no,
okay.
she definitely helped a lot, so
So to speak to the athletic side of things, yes, Megan was a talented athlete. She was a 4-year varsity athlete in high school. She won a bunch of awards. She was a captain of her college team. She had her shirt retired before the school shut down, but she was the only person in program history for 3 days before it shut down to have her shirt retired, which is cool.
so
All
exciting.
American honorable mention, all these different things. So she definitely has the accolades. um, but then I also got to see, so we started dating my senior year of high school, your junior year of high school, and I got to see how much pressure you put on your shoulders, with the high school team and with college and all that. And mental health is important, and it also applies in terms of sports psychology. But there was times where a game would end and you guys would lose 3-2 and you'd be, staying behind in the parking lot and you'd be crying and upset and said, "I let the team down and you scored 2 goals and then team conceded 3." and you talked about how the game was lost because of you. And I was like, "I don't know, I think you did, quite I know it's a team sport, you win and lose as a team, but I don't think a person who scores 2 goals is the reason why the team lost." And you just always carried that pressure on your shoulders. Um, I was also a college soccer player. I didn't have the same achievements that you had, but I also struggled with the sports psychology aspect. I guess in different ways. Yours was pressure of expectation, and mine was like self-induced pressures that nobody expected anything. I had this underdog mentality, so I put all this pressure on myself to prove people wrong, and then that kind of made me have my own issues in terms of performance. If we could speak to um, sports psychology a little bit, is there anything you wish you would have told yourself or someone like you in that situation where you're a skilled player but you feel all this pressure to help? What would you have told yourself back then or someone today if you had a girl in your office and she was also a talented athlete and she felt the same amount of pressure that you felt? What would you say to help?
Hmm, it's a good question. I think this goes back to me and just knowing, like, it's not it's not your responsibility
Mhm,
to make the team successful, or
mhm,
it's not only on you to be able to do your job and do it well. There are other people who also have to step up and perform and excel at the things that they're doing. So, I think I would tell myself, which kinda was is what I tell a lot of my athlete clients is, "What's your why? Why are you
mhm,
playing?" Right? If
mhm,
you're playing for other people, or if you're playing because, like, I had a teammate in high school for travel, her parents told her she had to play a sport if she wanted to get the certain car that she wanted when she could
mhm,
drive. Do
mhm.
you think that teammate really showed up and put in their best effort on the field and, like, performed every week really well?
Just
No.
as much as she needed to get the car.
No, she showed up just so she could get her orange Jeep and check a box, and
Yeah.
that translated to the field. Like, I didn't want her on the team with me,
Mhm,
so remembering your why, I loved it because it was fun, and I love schooling people and
mhm,
putting them on the ground with my footwork and scoring a goal and hearing the sound of the ball hit the back of the net, like, that still gets me hyped up when I think about it.
mhm,
But if you can't think back to that and know that you're playing because there's a certain reason why,
mhm.
then that's, for me, what I would tell myself is, remember your why. It's not all on you. Other people have jobs that they have to do and expectations that they have to meet too.
You've spoken to me, before the podcast, quite a bit about how you like the idea of controlling the controllables. You can't control your teammates. You can't control your orange Jeep teammates' effort.
Yeah.
Um, I imagine you would tell yourself back then something along the lines of as long as you did everything you could. It's John Wooden's definition of success is it's not winning or losing it, just knowing you went out there and left everything on the court.
Yeah.
Um, we're about to have a son, God willing. You're 8 months and 1 week pregnant or so, due date is, the 31st of this month.
Mhm.
We've talked about him getting into athletics for all the wonderful things it can teach him, but then not being one of these parents that says, "You have to go D1, you have to go pro, you have this, you have that, whatever," and you just push them, they're not passionate about the sport, and they burn out. The thing that I have, and we've talked about this and agreed on this, is an expectation for input, not for output. Um, for me, the kid's a winner as long as he gives his darndest. Um,
Um,
and that's the expectation I had for myself to eventually relieve pressure. But when I was struggling early on is because I told myself I always had to progress to the next level. So my story is I got cut from the JV team my freshman and sophomore year, didn't try out my junior year and focused on club, and then played varsity my senior year, and then was the only person from my class, men and women's, to go on and play soccer in college. And so I started at 9 when, some kids that were playing, at a high level in our area started with a ball at their feet when they're 3 years old, and
mhm.
everybody told me I was trash and give up and this, that, and the other, and I would you've seen me, like, send pictures and videos of me training when, like, the lights are out after high school games and no one else is on the field and all that stuff, kinda to prove a point. But we had different whys, and we had different expectations and pressures, and, so I told myself, you know, at one point, I was in, like, the 4th division of travel, and then the next year, I got 2nd division, and then the next year, I jumped up to a totally separate league. It was a team that was a year older than me, and they were the highest ranked team in the state of Virginia, and I didn't play at all, but I could at least say, "Oh, well, now I'm at this level," even if it was true or not. It wasn't actually growth that I was focused on, it was almost status. And then, you know, you go and play in college, and every single thing was about the next step and as opposed to appreciating the step that I was at. And something that I've learned from that is that, if you just treat every step, every door, every room that you're in, like it's the room to be in, then doors will open. It's kinda like the idea of, like, I love and appreciate all my clients, and I'm grateful they all gave me a chance because no one had to. Um, I treat them like they're my dream client, you know? And then
Uh-huh.
as opposed to early on when I first started with an internship, I was like, "Ooh, I wanna train pro athletes." And it's like, well, maybe pro athletes wouldn't be as fulfilling. Maybe they wouldn't care as much. Maybe I couldn't help them as much. So, it's all about perspective, and I'm sure that's something that you work on. If you'd
Mhm.
like to speak to that at all.
Yeah, I think there is when you're talking about athletes, that's another thing, just my sporting background and training experience. The practice that I work at, that's because they know that that's kind of my background. They tend to refer more of the athletes to me just because that's, again, my human
'Cause you're athletic.
experience. Yeah. Just because I know what it's like to be in high performance, like, teams that I were on, the level of training, the Olympic development team, like, it's not for the faint of heart. Like, if I wasn't in school, I was traveling on weekends to go get to games, but, there is this is one of the top reproduced or researched studies out there, and I always butcher the name, but it's called Yerkes-Dodson's law. But it's basically about the zone of optimal performance. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but
Is it
basic
arousal? Is it that whole thing?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's what I try and do with athletes and try and work
Can you
on with
explain that
them.
real quick for the listeners? How does the
Yeah,
law
so
work?
it's basically the amount of arousal or anxiety, and your stimulus depends
Mhm.
on or will produce a certain amount of performance. And you think of it as a bell curve. So too much anxiety when you're thinking about the bell curve is going to push you over the top of it, that optimal zone right at the very top. So
Mhm.
you're going to, if you look at in sports terms, overthinking, you're going to be making bad passes. Um, Maybe you're yelling at your teammates. You're really
Yeah,
just
you're putting too much pressure on the situation.
yeah, you're
You're too
putting too
hyped
much
up.
pressure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Not enough anxiety or arousal is gonna put you below that zone of optimal performance. So again, if you're looking at what is the reason why a teammate or somebody is showing up, or other life circumstances could be going on, they're not really invested and motivated.
Mhm.
They're not gonna sprint their hardest to go get the ball. They're not going
Mhm.
to maybe wanna try and max out that day on a bench or a deadlift or anything like
Mhm.
that. So, you're just gonna fall short. What we wanna do is we wanna give you enough stress, enough anxiety, air quotes, to put you in this flow state to where you're crushing it, you're maybe hitting your PRs, your passes are sick, you're schooling everybody,
Yeah.
and you're just performing at the best level that you could. So, that's what I kinda look at with my athletes is, okay, how do we find your why, get you into this zone of optimal performance, and make sure that you're caring enough, but also making sure you're enjoying it and your motivation to be there is good too.
Mhm. Um I like that, I agree with that. The flow state is such a difficult thing to explain to people, it's something you have to experience, but if you were to try to explain it, it's along the lines of being truly in the moment, you're not thinking about the past or the present, it's feeling everything, is very intuitive. Um, you're thinking ahead maybe by a second or 2 just to get ahead, just to have, like, what your next pass is, but you're not gonna think 3 plays ahead because that might not even materialize, you can't predict the future.
Yeah.
Um, it's where, like, things just happen. There's a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and the idea is that there's 2 selves. You have an inner dialogue. You talk to yourself, "Well, who is you and who is yourself?" And they say that you is actually kinda nasty to yourself, and you need to get you out of the way and let yourself take over. So an example is there's a tennis coach who's trying to teach people how to hit the ball, and he says, "Let your hand meet the ball." And they might just think, "Oh, well, I gotta hit the ball. I gotta hit the ball," and it's not working. He says, "No, don't think. The issue is thinking. You can have effort, but if you try too hard, you're not gonna be relaxed. You're gonna be too tense." It's like nothing should be going on in your head. Your body already knows how to do it. Let your body do what it
Yeah.
knows how to do. And
Yeah.
man, if I read that book in high school or college, that would have been helpful because when I was playing pickup, I'd have those moments where I'd be flow state because I had no pressure on myself. I was just playing for enjoyment. And then I'd get into a game and I thought every pass had to be perfect. Every shot had to be as in the top corner with as much pace as possible. And I
Yeah.
just put myself in a bad spot. So hindsight 2020. But anybody listening, if you're still involved in performance, we even have some golfers, in their 50s and 60s. But if you're listening and you're trying to crush the ball and you're whiffing it, you might be overly aroused
Yeah.
and then if you're not making contact the way you want to, you also might just be not giving it your best effort. So if you can give that sweet spot, that's what the zone is.
Yeah, and it's funny how you said it's hard to describe. I don't know if you've meditated before, right? Or
Meditated
yeah, or
Meditation for me is trying to clear the mind, and I once heard the idea that, like, if a thought enters, you acknowledge it and let it leave, almost like you're sitting on the side of the road. You see a car, if you watch 100 cars pass on the highway, you might not pay attention to every single car, but maybe one pops up in your mind. You might just say, "Okay, that's a red car," and then you let it go and you don't think about that red car for another 10
yeah.
minutes. You just try to get back to letting the cars flow without paying
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah, and mindfulness is simply just paying attention to what you are paying attention to, and that's a big thing that I work on with a lot of my clients to get them in that parasympathetic dominant state or that relaxed muscled body state, especially if you're dealing with performance anxiety or
Mhm,
general anxiety, trauma, anything like that. You just want their nervous system to be regulated. But when you're talking about flow state, yeah, I want you to just do. I don't want you to think, especially when you're
mhm,
talking about sports, because I can understand how in lifting it might be a little bit different. You kind of really do have to teach the mechanics first off to really get them to know what they're doing. But if I step out on the field and somebody tells me, turn your foot 90 degrees
mhm,
and then pass the ball at this, like it's just, that's too much. It's not going to translate well. So mindfulness is just being able to acknowledge in the moment where you're at on the field and do and watch those cars passing, right? So I gotta go run to
mhm,
the ball. Okay, run to the ball then, right? Just
mhm.
do. And a lot of the visualization, the routines, all that kind of stuff leading up to game time, whatever, is also really gonna help and translate really well too.
So I have 2 responses to that. One of them is just specifically when you're talking about being more specific with teaching technique, yes, you can say like, well, there's internal cues and external cues. Internal cues gets people to be almost overly mindful sometimes. So you say turn your feet
Yeah,
out X amount degrees and all that stuff.
right.
There are times where it's appropriate, but if you do too many cues like that, I normally will demonstrate a movement with as few cues as possible. Let the person do it, and if it looks good, I don't coach any more than I need to. If it looks bad and there's 3 things wrong with it, I'll only try to fix the biggest thing that day and not confuse them with the other stuff, because there's too much going on in the mind. So there is kind of a sweet spot. But if I can focus on external cues, not within the actual body, not saying, bend your knees to 90 degrees, instead of just say sit down until you touch a box. Maybe
Yeah.
there's a constraint. It kind of helps people in that sense. So there definitely is a correlation between your field and my field when it comes to the mental state and educating people. Um, the other one, oof, I'm trying to remember what you just said at the end there. You were talking about letting the cars pass. Oh, okay, yeah, I remember. Um, Something that was very difficult for me to learn was the idea of relaxing. If someone says relax, I would say I'm trying. You understand how that's ridiculous. You can't try to
Yeah.
relax. I mean,
Yeah.
relaxation is a letting go, and trying is a grasping. And I would try
Yeah.
to grasp a letting go.
Yeah.
So if anybody struggles with this whole trying to relax thing, don't don't try to relax. Relax. That's it. It's just that simple.
Well, and I'll say with that too, I'm trying to figure out how. how deep dive I wanna go into this, but your body, your nervous system, your sympathetic state, it does its job, it protects you, it has those responses because it's trying to protect you or do something for you, right?
Mhm,
So, you've got that anxiety, you're holding all that tension in your body before you're about to go play the championship game.
mhm,
Yeah, it's showing you, "Hey, I really care about this and I need to do a good job," right?
mhm,
And if you tell somebody, "Hey, just relax," it's like, "Well, if I could, I would," right?
yeah, yeah,
But a lot of times too, that's because people aren't in their bodies,
mhm,
right? So they are thinking about the future. A lot of times that anxiety is future-oriented thinking or it's past
mhm,
traumas or experiences informing current present, right? So
mhm,
if you can tune in and connect to your body, okay, let me do a quick body scan. All right, is my chest tight? Yeah, because I haven't taken a deep breath for a second. Okay, like engage that parasympathetic, that chill out muscle in your body. All right. Am I having a hard time breathing? Okay, let me do some progressive muscle relaxation. Let me force my body to tense up and then force it to relax too. That
mhm,
way I can engage the rational part of my brain and start doing those steps to help me prep for game time or this big lift or
mhm.
whatever it is that's got me in that hyper arousal state. So, a lot of times I tell people, check into your body because your body knows way more about what is going on in the experience than you think you do. So next time somebody says relax or you
Sure.
need help relaxing.
Your body's a lot smarter than people give it credit for. They always try to hack the body or trick the body, but the body has mechanisms put in place to protect you in certain
Yeah.
situations. The other thing too, and I'm sure you've learned this and experienced this, not one technique or not one way of addressing a problem is successful with everybody. To
Yeah.
speak from a sports performance perspective or sports psychology perspective, visualization is a technique that people talk about all the time, and some people swear by it and other people don't. An example is that some people say that to develop the confidence to actually make the big play, they have to first see themselves doing it. So they imagine, what does the grass feel like? What does it smell like? What is the sound? What if there's 80,000 people in the stands? Is there going to be heat? They're going to try to like live the moment as much as possible before a single play happens. And they
Mhm.
imagine, do I make a run to the far post? Does the ball cross me? Do I head the ball? Do I make a good contact? What does it feel like? Does it go past the goalkeeper? Do I hear the net? They
Yeah.
try to visualize as much as possible, and then they believe they can do it so that when it comes time to actually play the game, it's just automatic for them. For other people, I would try doing stuff like that. I would try analyzing all the time. I'd watch YouTube videos of Messi at night, and then I would try to visualize myself doing his movements. I'd try to copy things. I'd do all these things. I'd imagine myself before games scoring all these crazy goals and all this stuff. And all it did was put pressure for me to relive the moment I played in my head, which wasn't helpful. One time there was an interview of Messi, and they said, "Do you ever think about how you're gonna play before you play?" He says, "No, it's all instinct. I don't think this, that, the other." And so you watch the most, flow state player in the history of the game, and with great bias, I would say the greatest athlete of all time, if you're talking, dominance within the most competitive sport of all time. I say competitive because of the age of the sport, and it's the most popular sport. He's incredible, and he's an example of somebody that doesn't overdo it. He succeeds through relaxation, while other people, Ronaldo, for example, who's a very famous example, you can tell just by the way he moves, he's always tense, but he puts that pressure on himself, does all these mental strategies, and it's worked for him as well. So short and sweet, not one thing works for everybody.
Yeah, and I think to that, the thing that stuck out to me the most is, okay, what was your why in that moment, right?
Me? Yeah,
Yeah,
me
like Messi
personally.
but that's
Are
my
you
thing.
no, are you actually asking me or are you asking like my sister? I can answer.
No, I mean, yeah,
Okay.
so, like, answer, what was your why in that moment?
My why, if we're, like, taking it back, I started playing soccer because, in elementary school, I didn't have a lot of friends, and then it was something that my dad did, and I thought it was something we could talk about, and then it was a way I could make friends, and that was the original reason why I started playing, but then I hated losing more than anything, and I wasn't very good, and people would put me down, and so it was
Right.
just an opportunity to prove people wrong and prove myself right. So that was
Right.
my why for everything, but then
So
that put
messy
pressure on
could
me.
show up, and then
Yeah, he was already good, he
his
could just be happy, yeah.
well, no, like, his why, yeah, right, playing because I love it, playing because it brings
Yeah,
you joy, whatever, and then you're stepping onto the field being like, "I'm gonna make all these friends, I'm gonna be really good, I'm gonna be sick at this sport,"
mhm,
and you're trying to visualize, and it's like, "Well, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, what the heck?" Like, and then it
mhm,
just all the cascade, right? So that's
mhm.
an example of, alright, ask people what's their why.
That's
What
also why I'm sure you would say this in your field, people need to be able to look inward, ask a question like, "What's your why?" And then from there, you are better educated when it comes to deciding how you should deal with your problems. I would say the same thing with exercise selection. I give somebody an exercise, I tell them, if it's a new exercise, how does your body respond the next day? Is it sore but feels good? Do you feel like it translated a few months of doing that exercise to better performance?
yeah,
Do you think it made you feel better? All these different things. Sometimes people do a new mobility exercise, say they feel amazing the next day. Maybe they'll do another strength exercise, say they feel too sore the next day. So I do preach awareness. You have to be acutely aware, you have to be chronically aware. But then also, this gets into the overanalysis situation. So there is a sweet spot, and the
yeah.
only way you discover that is to analyze without overanalyzing, you know?
Yeah,
So
and that's the thing I notice a lot with my clients too, is that it tends to be like, this is an generalization, it's not. But it's either people are overthinkers and they're over whatever you wanna call it, or they're not, and they're
mhm,
essentially, like, desensitizing themselves, or they're intellectualizing, right?
mhm,
So it's about finding the balance between the 2 of it. So, yes, like, think about these movements, think about how it feels in my body, but don't overdo it so much
mhm,
to where it's just not gonna be helpful or successful,
mhm,
like, it's the balance between, and that's what everything is basically what I think back to is feelings and logic, put them together, and how
mhm.
do we regulate them together, both on and off the field or in the gym.
Has anyone ever accused you of thinking too much?
No.
No? That's funny. I do think it is I actually find it like, that was something that's confusing for me was the athletes that didn't overthink. Sometimes it's like, "Oh, man, I don't think much about anything." I'm like, I just didn't get that. I was like, that was always weird." Shifting gears slightly, I wanna ask a, Q&A question that I got from a loyal listener and a friend, two-time guest on the show, Tyler Peretz. He's a college strength coach. I'm gonna try to paraphrase it, and if I didn't ask it properly, I'm just gonna reread it, word for word, but he's asking for tips and tricks to approach athletes if they're going through a difficult time. How do you begin a conversation with somebody, if you can see they're going through something?
Hmm. I think you previously gave me a heads up about this question, I think, when it
Mhm,
came in earlier, and my first thought was be curious,
mhm,
and I know not everybody has the, listening skills or the art of asking questions in a in a good way, but be curious and just listen. I think the times where I felt like a coach cared about me the most or really wanted to make sure that I was doing okay in life was either they pulled me off to the side or somehow, like, we were just hanging out for a second and they're like, "Hey, I noticed this about you today. What's going on?" Or, "Hey, you're not really playing like yourself normally. Tell me
mhm,
what's happening." And that opens the floodgates to just a safe space to be able to disclose and be like, my parents yelled at me before I came to practice and it really pissed me off today or whatever, but just be curious and don't be afraid to ask those questions because a lot of times, more often than not, the person's going to need to talk about them if you're afraid to ask them. Silence is not going to do anything for that kid or that athlete. So, if you can just be curious, ask the questions, and also respect if they're not ready to talk about it too. At
Mhm,
least they know that you're there.
mhm.
That I think is gonna be really big.
It sounds like you're saying a gentle and personal approach is a good way to go about it, and then this always makes me think of Ted Lasso, where he says, "Be curious." You know, people will be judgmental, but they won't be curious. I think the world would be a better place. I think we can all be better as people if we assume less and ask more, and are willing to go into conversations with an open mind and be prepared to be wrong. That's where growth comes from. And there's people that have blinders on because they've already made up their minds.
Yeah.
Um, so, Tyler, if you're listening, just be a good dude and have those conversations.
Well, and I think too there is this theory called Bronfenbrenner.
Mhm,
It was from my developmental class back in grad school.
mhm,
But basically it talks about all these different zones or circles within a person's life. So school, friends, family, athletics, whatever else you want to put in there. All of those zones or those circles influence and impact the person's development and their
mhm,
upbringing.
mhm,
So, if your athlete or your client is coming into the office and it's very clear that something is wrong or they're not themselves,
mhm,
one of those zones, one of those things is really probably not okay or
mhm,
something happened in them. And that to me, a client comes in my office, I could just tell by their body language sometimes. I'm like, "Okay, something is
sure. Something
very much
happened.
off." Yeah.
Mhm,
Or I could tell if they're having a bad day by how much caffeine they are carrying into my office as well, because we have a Starbucks literally 5 minutes from our office, and if it's a venti, I'm like, "Okay, there's an issue."
mhm,
But yeah, and I think I know we've been saying, "Okay, what's your why?" this whole talk. But when you get into conversations with people, a lot of times why will produce the answer, "I don't know," or "Nothing," especially
mhm,
with teens. So, if you can ask a lot of those open-ended questions. So, "What's going on? Who pissed you off today? Where'd you just come from where you were in a bad mood?" Right?
mhm,
And making sure that you're asking what, how, who, where, when, and
mhm,
not just simply why. You might get a little bit more out of
mhm.
that person too.
Um, I was gonna say something along those lines just before you're talking about the strategies. Um, let's go in a slightly different direction. I'll see if I can
Mhm.
remember that question. But what are some major myths and misconceptions in regard to therapy? Maybe some stigmas, and then how would you destigmatize therapy so people would give it a chance?
Ugh, okay. What are the biggest misconceptions?
Yes. Do you
That
have
you're
like people make assumptions you hear all the time, and you're like, that's not what it's like.
that you're paying for a friend.
Hmm.
That's not it at all. You're paying just to be told you're right. That's also not it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you're just paying to sit on somebody's couch and them like shake their head and say, "Yep, you're you're right to feel that way," or that person was wrong. It's not just a yes man for
Hmm.
an hour. It's
Hmm.
doing the deep internal work to make sure that you are able to have a healthy, sustainable life and work through everything that is bringing you into the office. Then what
Um,
was
the other one was how to destigmatize. I'm sure you've heard people say, "I don't need therapy. I'm not going to therapy. I'm not crazy." How do you get someone to think that it's okay to go to therapy? Why should they? How can you break down those barriers?
ask questions.
Yeah.
I and it's funny when people have that response, my mind immediately goes to, okay, you have such a protective factor, you have such a guard up
Mhm,
that tells me you're afraid of whatever it is, right? So
mhm,
yeah, you're not crazy. Nobody's crazy, but there's definitely a protective part of you that's showing up that's trying to keep you safe from
mhm,
vulnerability or talking about some trauma or something, right? So
mhm.
I think the biggest thing that I would say is the people who I work with and the people who sit on my couch are the strongest, most resilient, brave individuals I have ever met in my life, and because they're willing
To face it.
to face it, yeah, because it's a lot scarier to face it or re-engage with it
Mhm,
if it's in the past than just to pretend like it never happened.
mhm.
So,
To
still
speak Sorry, go ahead.
no, go for it.
Well, I was gonna speak to that a little bit. You're talking about, protective mechanisms, and to share my story very quickly, we're having a son, and as soon as we found out the gender of the baby, I reflected and I was like, "The kid is gonna become in part what I show him." And so it just added extra responsibility. He's gonna grow up, be a man, I have to model what it is to be a good man. And one of the things I reflected on is I've had anger issues forever, and I was tired of having them. And I thought with therapy, my stigma for my reason for not wanting to go was just wanting to be able to do things on my own, not needing help. It wasn't that I didn't believe in therapy or the value or something like that, but just as a point of pride for me individually, I had to be able to do it on my own. And I wanted to exhaust all those things. And if I couldn't, then I would finally reach out for help. And I got to the point where having a kid was a catalyst for me. It was like, all right, I have tried for a long time. I still haven't had any answers. It may be time to actually reach out to somebody and get this sorted out before the kid is born, and I was all in, with, trying to get the work done. You also have to pay for it. I don't wanna pay for it forever. So I told the guy, I told the therapist, that I was like, "Let's get right down to brass tacks. This is what's been going on. This is what I want to solve." And we got after it, and we did a lot of great work, but then the reason why I bring that up is because one of the audiobooks that I listen to, I recommend to anybody that struggles with anger is, oh goodness, what was it called? Do you remember? It was called The Anger Trap, I
Yeah,
believe? Okay, it's called The Anger Trap, and one of the things that they said was that, um, anger is often due to self-preservation. You feel like you're being attacked, so you have to protect yourself, and it could be like we were talking about how people are guarded, you say therapy, and then they say, "I don't need therapy, therapy this, that, the other," and they're protecting themselves. Um, that's an opportunity to dig deeper, and when I learned about the difference between healthy expressions of anger and unhealthy expressions of anger. Just to summarize the book, they talked about how healthy anger is assertiveness. It's the ability to stand your ground while holding respect for the other person. Unhealthy anger is where you are just like a raging tornado and you don't care who you wipe out. So you're willing to
mhm,
disrespect people. You're willing to either be actively aggressive, passively aggressive, or you suppress and eventually explode. So there are
yeah,
healthy ways to express anger. I didn't like the idea that anger being a natural human emotion should be avoided at all cost. It was almost liberating for me to learn that you can express anger, there are just healthier ways to do it.
yeah,
So it's not even in line with the sports psychology sort of topic we were discussing earlier, but we're talking about stigma. I did wanna share that I had in my own way stigma, even though I respected the profession because it's what you did.
yeah,
But it's just one of those things where it doesn't hurt. It's the same thing with personal training is like maybe you could on your own lose the weight or get stronger or this or that, but you could also get a coach who can help accelerate the process for you or remove some of the road bumps
yeah.
through their education and experience.
Well, and I was thinking, like, taking it back to an athlete, right? If you
Mhm,
have a kid who if you're just a coach or if you're personal trainer in the gym, mentor, whatever, and a kid can't take feedback,
sure.
right? Or if they can't or they're getting angry at their teammates or
Mhm,
whatever, there's a protective factor in place that is showing up to keep them from having to face whatever really is underneath the surface.
mhm.
They might not know it, right? Because their brains are underdeveloped and they're maybe not that
Could be an older
entrenched.
person too, though.
Yeah, yeah, but they like everybody's got protective factors, whether they really realize it or not.
Yeah,
And okay, so anger is keeping you from feeling whatever certain way, right? Or
yeah.
you can't take constructive feedback from a coach because that means you're not strong enough or, you're whatever it is, right?
Whatever the
It's
case may be, sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that's a big clue again into just like understanding why you're showing up. Like, what's the reason that your kids are showing up in the gym, your clients, whoever, older, younger, and also trying to understand, you know, what do they want to get out of it? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, just there's so many protective factors, and you think about that, and it's just I could deep dive into that all day long, especially
I
when you
guess
get
part of it is just trying to make it seem less scary or just trying to sell the upside enough.
yeah.
I think that's maybe one of the best ways to destigmatize therapy in general. Um, so let's try to get to so we talked about myths and misconceptions. Is there anything that you're seeing in the world of mental health? It could be from a professional context, what you're seeing from other therapists, other studies, other trends. It can also just be people in general in society. Just anything surrounding the mental health and emotional health space, positive trends that you've noticed. Is there anything that stands out?
I love that the world is kind of or in the therapy space, just in general, things
Mhm,
are acknowledging the balance,
mhm.
right? Like, again, I want my clients to feel and have those human experiences and connect and know how to regulate and go through those emotions. And then I want them to be able to use their logic and reasoning skills. So I'm glad that there's a little bit more of a balance now versus leaning one end of the extreme because it's destructive thinking. Or
You know, it's so great about what you're saying. I'm smiling. You can see that I'm smiling as you're talking about the beauty of balance of emotion and logic. We have this recorded for all eternity. So the next time, I go my logical route, you go your emotional route, I get to be like, all right, well, you think logic's important too. I'm just messing around. But
no, no.
um yeah,
It
there is space for both. I appreciate the analogy you made in the
yeah,
beginning about a logical world is a cold world and an emotional world is a crazy world.
yeah. We're just humans. Like your clients, whether they're older, whether they're younger, whatever sport they play, or whatever the reason is that they're showing up into the gym, they've got a reason for it. They're human. They just
Mhm.
want to know that what they're doing is okay and it's valid and it's healthy and they're doing a good job at it. And I think that's just such a huge part about any field really or just anything in general is you just want to know that
Mhm.
you're a human being with normal human being
Mhm.
experiences and then you can use your logic and all of that after.
Also, we talked about this before we even started the podcast. If you'd be willing to share some of your personal experiences, 'cause you're talking about wanting to feel seen and heard and all that stuff. I think other people opening up also helps people who are currently struggling so they don't feel alone in those situations.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping that me sharing, that I struggled with anger issues helps the next person who's struggling with anger issues to actually do something about it, and make their life better and make the people they love their lives better as well. So the last question I have for you is, do you have any parting pieces of advice that can be about literally anything? It could be to anyone, just any one piece of wisdom or advice you wanna share.
Man, I wish I knew that question beforehand. I really would have
Prepared for it?
come out with like the most Buddha
Yeah.
answer ever. um I think it kind of goes back to what I said a little bit earlier maybe, but
Mhm,
your body knows you way more than you know yourself.
mhm,
And whether it be a high stress situation, a game, a match, like work, whatever it is, if you can engage your parasympathetic nervous system, which is just the big fancy word for your body's again, I call it like the chill the F out muscle. It's your override to your stress response. If you can engage that through whatever skills that you know how to, breathing, body scans, whatever, you're gonna be able to hack a lot of the stuff that comes your way in terms of just high stress overall. So just getting to know that and don't be afraid to get into your body and listen to it, I think is something that's really powerful. And also has changed my work as a mental health provider and my my daily life too. I'm not as anxious or overthinking just because I know how to engage that relaxation response. In my opinion, you're smiling a little bit thinking that I'm still
I guess it's better than it was. So progress,
I
not
think
perfection, right?
yeah,
Um,
but that would be my one thing. It's like just try and engage your body's relaxation response.
yeah, look inward and learn a few techniques to help you out when you're not doing too hot.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, so can you please plug your practice, your social media, anything that you want to plug?
So, I'm
You don't have to
not
plug social media if you don't want to.
not gonna plug social media
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
if
yeah, that's
clients
fine.
are I like to keep my professional life very
And
separate,
private life, yes.
my private life,
Mhm. Your practice
but,
perhaps?
if people for whatever reason wanna maybe try out therapy with me, I'm also just getting trained in EMDR, which is a whole 'nother world too,
Mhm,
um, but yeah, it's Mountain View Therapy Group in Percival and, only licensed in the state of Virginia right now, so can only provide to people in the state, but who knows, could be changing one day.
'kay, and then the, final thing that I wanna say is, thank you for your time, your expertise, your experience, for being a guest on the podcast, and for growing our child. Uh, appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.